Women think that men think like them. We don't. We do not think like you. Women are the gatekeepers of sex. Men are the gatekeepers of commitment. If he's not giving you commitment in exchange for the sex, that says something. And then we wonder why we're unsatisfied with life and we're drinking beer on the weekends trying to escape the reality that we're not doing what we were put on this earth to do. And it's gnawing at us. We could feel like something's missing in my life. And you can't put your finger on it. Kiddie porn. I've even heard like cases, I think, with people caught in child pornography, and it started out as something very normal, and then it had to get more twisted. I believe that the definition of diminishing returns, pornography may be in the definition in the dictionary, because you get diminishing returns over time. You have to get more of it. You have to do more to get the same result.
Hello, Rob, and hello, everyone. Welcome to part 2 of our conversation with Rob Kowalski. Everybody, you can see we've changed clothes. It's been a couple of days since we talked, since we recorded the first part of our conversation. Hence, Rob, I reckon it might be worth for us to do a quick recap of what we talked about.
Yeah, that's great.
We covered a little bit of your history in short, where you come from, the years you spent in the stripping business, in the partying sphere in the US, then your radical transformation, how you abandoned all that previous life of yours, how you became an advocate for sexual abstinence before marriage. Obviously, there is much more in your book that you wrote, that I translated, which is part of what drove this conversation to begin with. I encourage all of our readers to get a copy of the book if for whatever reason, for example, if you don't have the financials to get a copy, reach out to me. I'd be happy to assist, because it's worth reading. There are plenty of practical advices as well towards the latter part of the book, which Rob and I will talk about shortly. There are a couple of points, Rob, which I wanted us to reiterate and to emphasize on before we carry on with what we've planned for the second part of the conversation. The first question is, what's the big problem? And can you emphasize a little bit, what's the big problem about sex before marriage? I know that in the last part we talked about some of the reasons not to have sex before marriage, but what's the big deal? Sex
Right.
is fun.
I used to think the same thing, man. To me, sex was like a massage. It was like, if it feels good, do it. Why would we wait? And when a girl said she wanted to wait, I didn't even understand why she would want to wait. I was like, why? We're going to make each other feel good. Why wouldn't we do this? I almost thought it was a little manipulative, actually. Like, oh, they just wanted to get me into a relationship, so they're going to withhold the sex. Okay, but it's much more than that. Okay, so let's look at some things that are happening in the world right now. First off, there's in America, I don't know what it is over there, 1 in 3 children right now are being raised in fatherless homes. Okay, so there's that, right? Pregnancy is a real possibility. I mean, you have sperm, you have eggs, things happen. So you have sex with somebody that you haven't really, you don't know, you're just like, yeah, she's hot, she's good enough for tonight. And you next thing you know, you got a baby. And this baby, if he doesn't have a father in the home, or she doesn't have a father in the home either, then they're going to have some significant challenges. All the studies prove that the depression, the dropout, the early pregnancy, the suicide rate, serial killers, many of them come from fatherless homes. I want the number of people that are incarcerated right now, at least men, is somewhere around 80%, I think, are from fatherless homes. And so think about that. The minority, 1 out of 3, which it wasn't even that, when I was growing up, it might've been 1 out of 4 or 5 were being raised in fatherless homes. Yet the vast majority of incarcerated people are from fatherless homes. You can't tell me that's not a correlation. Okay. So then there was a Pew Research study recently that said half of all women aged 25 to 44 are going to be single by the year 2030. First, let me go back a second. That fatherless homes, 1 in 3 children are in fatherless homes. That number is going to double by 2030, or it's expected to double. So whatever the number of kids is. So now we're going to have something like half of all the kids in this country are going to be involved with substance. What do you think the country's going to be like when those kids grow into adults? Because they're suicidal, they're depressed, they're incarcerated. The society's going to freaking collapse is what's going to happen. Because a society can't thrive with a bunch of freaking degenerates, a bunch of people running around that are depressed and criminals. Okay, so this is a real issue. Okay, now you got half of the women 25 to 44 by 2030 are going to be single. Okay, so now you got all these single women that want a husband, but because this is what happened. Okay, so back in the day, I don't know if people know this, but you got something like 80% of the single women are dating and sleeping with 20% of the men, because women are hypergamous. They want a man that's better than them, better looking, better educated, higher social status, whatever. So they want the 9s and the 10s, the alphas. And a man is not hypergamous. I know this. I slept with women that were far below me, that my sexual marketplace value. If you know, and I'm just using terms here. So I know these terms will offend people when I say sexual marketplace value or alpha or beta. These are just placeholders. I just have to use words to describe the thought. Okay. So don't get offended. Try to understand what I'm saying. But women want to date and marry the best, like they should. But what happens is because they don't have they've been lied to. They've been told that, look, you can go out, girl, do you go have sex with guys. There's no consequence, freedom, feminism, whatever. And they believe this lie. So they go out, they find a guy that wants to sleep with them. And he may be a 9 or a 10, and maybe they're a 6 or a 7 or a 5 or whatever. They have zero chance of getting the relationship. But because that guy wants to sleep with them, they think they're going to get the relationship eventually. They have the hope. So this guy, this 9 or 10, he's got 6 or 7 of them on a roster. He's sleeping with them all once every week or two, stringing them along. Now, while he's stringing, most women don't sleep with more than one man at a time. So now you got all the men that are 6s, maybe 7, 6, 5, all these men. Now they're invisible to these women. But had these women actually protected their purity, waited, they would have seen that 9 or 10. All he wanted to do was have sex with them. He wasn't interested in a relationship. But what happens is, because now they're not protecting it, they have sex and they're taken off the marketplace. So you got all these men. Now you got 80% of the men in the sexual marketplace that are invisible to women. If you're not a 9 or 10, if you're a 9 or 10, you're cleaning up right now. You're having so much sex. It's a great time to be alive for those guys. I mean, I'm saying that tongue in cheek. But, you know, the vast majority of men are being left out of the sexual marketplace, and that has real bad consequences for the world. You have all these women that are not getting married. They're just giving their best years to these guys that are going to get no relationship from, stringing them along. And then we wonder, you know, why people talk about that women are waiting to get married later in life. And because they say it was a result of feminism. I do think that plays a part. But the bigger part is that they're dating the Chads. They're sleeping with these guys that are wasting their best years when they should be building families. They should be finding their sexual marketplace. If you're a 7, you got to find a guy that's a 7. Maybe you'll get an 8, but you're probably not going to get a 10, because he's not going to commit to you under monogamy only when he's looking for a 10 himself. Now, he'll have sex with you for weeks and months and years maybe and waste your best years, which is exactly what's happening right now. So this is real bad for the world. Like, when you don't put strong boundaries on sex before marriage, it's hard to find who's actually really, especially for a woman, is he really interested in me, or does he just want to have sex with me? Because women think if a man wants to have sex with them, oh, he likes me. No, it doesn't mean that to a man. I've had sex with women I never wanted to see again. I just wanted to, you know, get off. So, and women think that men think like them. We don't. We do not think like you. Women are the gatekeepers of sex. Men are the gatekeepers of commitment. If he's not giving you commitment in exchange for the sex, that says something. So yeah, this is very serious. This isn't just like, you know, it's not just, you know, carnal, whatever pleasure that can be just dismissed with no consequences. There's very serious consequences for the world in this.
Yes. The way I understand it, and from reading your book, Rob, is that there are 2 sets of distinct consequences. So one is on a personal level, both for the woman, particularly for the woman, but also for the man. Mm-hmm. but also the wide, far-reaching consequences that you talked about, the societal implications, which are very destructive. And I would like to read another short paragraph from your book. One theory that you presented about the women who believe that the women that say that they are not looking for a long-term relationship with a man.
Yeah.
You criticize that concept a little bit. This is what you say: any woman who says that, meaning that she's fine with just having a one-night stand or a short-term affair with a man, any woman who says that is either in denial or knows she's lying, and at some point it will catch up with her. It's biologically impossible. The exception is when a woman has sex with so many different partners, her emotional attachment through sex becomes void. It's as if her brain has literally been rewired and does not expect love, affection, or tenderness.
Yeah.
It's a very tough pill to swallow for some women.
Yeah. I believe that's 100% true. They're in denial, or they know they're lying. They, or they're jaded, because you see this with a lot of older women, cougars, they call them. Mm-hmm. They've given up on the fairy tale. They're like, at this point, let's just have some fun. And they're just, and it's sad because that's not what God wanted for them. Mm-hmm. They're one of God's daughters, but they've given up on it because of the way the world is. So no, I 100% believe that's true. You had mentioned something about how it plays out for a man, because it is very different, right? The motivation to do this for a man and a woman is very different. As a man, you're like, why wouldn't I have, if a woman, okay, yeah, I understand it's going to play out bad for the woman and maybe even for the world, but how's it going to hurt me, right? As a man, that's what, selfishly men will think that. And you have to appeal to them differently, because for a man, we're all about mission and vision, right? Purpose. Why am I here? I want to achieve. I want to be a high achiever. And I can say emphatically that, like, before I became committed to waiting, in the how many ever years it was before, before I actually committed myself to sexual purity, I accomplished way more in the, 10 or 12 years after committing myself to purity than I did in the, 35 before that, or whatever it was, because I harnessed that sexual energy and I wasn't wasting time and energy chasing women. I was actually focused on my mission. There's something in Napoleon Hill's book called Sex Transmutation. I don't know if you've ever read the book Think and Grow Rich, but he talks about how all these men of great achievement throughout history have harnessed their sexual energy and redirected it for other means of building empires and wealth and all kinds of things. And I think that that's true because, you can get hemmed up with the wrong women very easily, like we talked about, babies or just drama. You got women and you're spending I don't think men realize how much time and energy we put into lining sex up, flirting with like, versus just put it in neutral. It's okay to look, but that's not what we're here for, man. The woman is just complementary to your mission. You are here for a God-given mission. You're put on this earth to do something very particular to you. You got to figure out what that is. Go after it. The woman is just the helpmate. She's just the icing on the cake. She's not the cake. We make the woman the cake. And then we wonder why we're unsatisfied with life and we're drinking beer on the weekends trying to escape the reality that we're not doing what we were put on this earth to do. And it's gnawing at us. We could feel like something's missing in my life. And you can't put your finger on it because you didn't. Look, the order from the very beginning, if you look at Adam and Eve, Adam did not get Eve right away. Adam got a job from God. Name the animals. Take care of the garden. Later, Eve was created. He says, now I'll make a suitable helper for him. Okay, then she came along. We want to get it's purpose before person. Okay, we want to get the person before the purpose because we don't like to wait, right? And I'm guilty of that. I did it. But then at some point, I didn't because I didn't even do it on purpose, to be honest. I just wanted to be obedient to God. So I just said, okay, I'll wait, God. And then I realized, and then the purpose became clear because of sex transmutation, maybe because I was being obedient to God and he revealed it to me. But then I got my purpose. And then the person, okay, comes along to be that suitable helper. So I think men need to understand, if you put the person before the purpose, the likelihood of you finding the purpose is probably not that high. And then even if you do find the purpose, you probably have the wrong person next to you, because the purpose is going to determine who the person is that is your helper. Because if your purpose is to whatever, travel around the world or build this huge family or whatever it is, you better make sure you take that into consideration. Who's filling that position as your helpmate, because I mean, I shared my vision with my wife not long after we talked. I said, this is where I'm going. Can you see your life working out like this? Because this is what I'm doing. Would you like to come along? And women love a man with a vision. They love an ambitious man. But if you don't know what you're here for, bro, like I would say, pump the brakes, man. Figure that out first.
I personally link that, and I don't know if you'll agree with me or not, but I personally link all of that with the what I call the wider attack on masculinity nowadays in the culture and the current state of things in the world. So politically driven, culturally driven, media driven, education driven, and all of that. Because a man without a purpose, it's a bit of an effeminate way of living, at least in my perspective.
Yes.
Because obviously men and women are very different, contrary to what the world tells us. We are not the same. We're drastically different, and that's why we complement each other.
I would just add, conversely, a woman without a man to be a helpmate to is very masculine. It's almost like a man without a mission is like, why are you here, bro? What are you on this earth for? Why were you even created? You have no purpose. But a woman that's not married to a man and is acting as a helpmate, what are you here for, woman? What's your point? What's the point of your existence? The mission comes from God. There's a chain of command. People don't like it. It sounds misogynistic. It's God, Jesus, man, woman, children. That's the chain of command. It's not man and woman. It's man and then woman. Okay. The woman is the helpmate to the man. Every woman should have a husband. Okay. It's not good for a woman to be alone for her life. Now, men can be alone, and actually Jesus alludes to this in Matthew 19. He says, look, this isn't for everybody. Marriage isn't for everybody. So there should be value in celibacy too, serving God and maintaining your sexual purity. It's not easy. It's hard. I did it. But I honestly believe every woman needs a husband, and every man needs a mission.
It's an upside down world we're living in, isn't it?
It is.
Women try to be men, but at best they can be a very weak man, and then men just abdicate from manhood, so they can be a very poor woman. To put it that way, which sort of leads me to the next question, the next point I wanted us to reiterate on. It's about your transformation. Was that sudden, or was it a gradual process where you started to realize what your previous life was leading to and all the consequences that it had?
It was both. I mean, so I had a radical encounter with Jesus. Okay. It was like a road to Damascus where I heard God's voice. I prophesied. God told me some things about the future. It was weird. Like, it freaked me out. But I went from not knowing if God was real. I didn't really even think about God. My God was pleasure. It was whatever was in front of me, my 6 feet in front of me. That was my God. If it was a girl, if it was fun, a drug, whatever. But then I heard God's voice, and I was like, okay, he called me as if he said, trust me. He kept saying, tell me, trust me, trust me, trust me. Cause I was scared. I was like, what's going on? What do you want? Like, what is this? And, and it was like, you ever see the movie, The Matrix?
Yes.
The point where he takes the red pill or the blue pill. It was like, I took the red pill. I took it, and I saw, at that point I knew the truth. I could have denied it. It was very hard to walk away from my life because I was so entrenched in that lifestyle. It was so much a part of my identity, like being Rob, the promoter, the stripper, the party guy, the guy that was good with girls, all that. I had to walk away from it all my friends. I didn't even know any Christians, and it was very painful. So like in one sense it was sudden, but then in the other sense it was gradual, because I still had to be sanctified. I was still that same person that had all that sin and wrong thinking in me, and I'm still being sanctified. I'm still kind of a hot mess on some level, but no, I stopped on a dime. As soon as I heard God's voice, I was like, I gave away all my costumes. I quit stripping. I quit promoting. I broke up with my girlfriend. I didn't have sex again from that moment for the next 6 years. And that was only by mistake. I read the Bible a few times. I went, immediately I started going to church and trying to learn about this God that I really didn't know anything about. So it was both, now I could have pretended like it wasn't, because, the night before we had gone out partying. I was in Cancun, Mexico when this happened, when I had this encounter, and I could have pretended like, cause it was tempting to, I would have had to lie to myself to pretend like it wasn't God. But the pull toward the other side was so strong, because, it was like choosing that narrow path that you really don't, at the moment, that you didn't want to go down. But now I look back on it, I'm like, God, I'm so glad I made that choice, because I think about how I used to live my life, and it just disgusts me. It's like, oh God, I can't imagine being that person anymore. But in the moment, I couldn't imagine doing anything but that, because it was just, that was my way of life. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it was both. It was like very sudden, but then also gradual over time, learning to be obedient to Christ and follow his ways.
That makes perfect sense to me. The reason why I asked the question is because part of our audience are people who are not Christians, not believers in the sense that you and I would place.
Yeah.
So the concept of that radical transformation might look alien and unbelievable, but I understand the process of sanctification that you mentioned as well, because we are all in the same game.
I will say one thing though. Let me just add this, because I had a friend. Okay, so at the time that this happened, I was probably the most popular person in my city. Me and maybe one other guy, and his name was Chris McKinney, and he was a friend of mine. He owned a nightclub, and I was a promoter for him, and we were promoters together at this club in DC, and everybody knew us and wanted to hang out with us and whatever. And I had this encounter. I walked away from everything. I told Chris about it. I said, I'm changing my ways, whatever. And he knew I got out of the business. 7 weeks later, almost the identical thing happened to him, where he got called by God. He had dreams and visions, and he told me all about it. He's like, I'm going to change my ways, all this stuff. And I was like, Chris, this is great. We can lead so many people to God. I was so excited for him. And then I guess about 4 weeks or so went by, and I remember seeing like this flyer from from the club he owned, and it was really sacrilegious. And I was like, bro, what is this? I said, I thought you were going to change and sell the club. And he's like, he said, you can find meaning in anything. And he just dismissed what happened as if it wasn't real, like as if it was just his imagination. And that's because I could have done that, but I would have had to lie to myself. Now, here's where I'm going with the moral of the story, or the punchline, if you will, is I went to visit him recently on my honeymoon. Just a couple months ago, I was passing through, I drove through about 15 states with my wife, my new wife. My only wife. I've only been, first time I've been married, but it's just a few months ago. So we went on like a road trip for our honeymoon, and I was passing by where he lives in Alabama, which is very far from where I live now. And I was like, I told my wife all about him, and we went to see him, and he was just like a shell of himself. He was overweight. He was stuck at this little business that he had started where somebody had stolen from him, so he couldn't really find good help. So he was kind of like, could never leave the business because he didn't have any help. And he was just, I remember thinking to myself, man, if I wouldn't have followed God, like that's where I could have ended up, or maybe even worse. And it's like, look, the Bible says no discipline feels pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it yields a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who are trained by it. So right now, my life is pretty good. Like I'm very excited about where I'm headed. I got a coaching business. I mean, I got this book. It got translated in all these different languages, Bulgarian now, and and I got my wife I'm so happy with, and my future is bright. But it was only because I made that decision. When God called, I said yes. And I followed him, and it was hard in the beginning. I won't lie. It was so painful, but it kept getting better. Little by little, it got better. And now it's like, boom, I'm in the promised land, where I look at him, and he did not. He decided to hold the wheel himself and steer his own life. And he steered himself into this place I can tell he's not all that happy. And my heart goes out to him. So I just encourage anybody out there, like, look, God's real. Jesus loves you, ask him to come into your heart and help you to make the right decisions, and just trust that that still small voice, that like your gut instinct when something, like you might not even be able to explain it, but like when I pray about something, I just like, it's a feeling. I get that peace, like that check in my spirit, even if it doesn't make sense to my head, you know, or my heart even, but if it's in my gut, that feels right. Like, that's like, okay, God's leading me in this direction. That's how it works for me. I don't know. How does it work for you?
Exactly the same. And it's the gospel example, isn't it? Jesus told the same message to different people. Some of them responded, others didn't. It's the sad reality for that person that you mentioned, but it's not too late even for him to repent. The problem is that he's wasted his life.
Yes.
He's not even touched the purpose that you mentioned about earlier.
Yeah. There's a verse I'm trying to find, and if I can, till the full light of day. Let me see if I want to read it to you, because it's very appropriate to what we're talking about. It says, "The path of the righteous is like the light of dawn, which shines brighter and brighter until full day." And that really is it, because it gets, if you look at somebody that let God lead their life and live righteous, usually their path gets brighter and brighter. You know, you see versus you go, I mean, you drive by any bars in America and you see all these old people and they're just freaking hanging on, trying to numb the pain because they lived a shitty life and they're just drinking their sorrows away, waiting to die. Versus if you live a righteous life and you let God lead, your path should get brighter and brighter until the full light of day, like the proverb goes. So anyway, I just wanted to share that.
Oh, a very interesting thought came to my mind just now. I'll say it out loud. That your previous life as a promoter, as a stripper, I reckon that God, being the biggest and best mathematician in the world, well, and outside of the world, obviously, he's led you through that process with a particular reason, because all of that, at least, at the very least, and it's not a small thing actually, which I'm about to say, is you interacting with hundreds and thousands of women and being in promoting, which can be a very hectic and a manly environment where you need to act, you need to be in front of people and to speak out loud and present yourself and do all these marketing and sales related activities, etc. Has prepared you to speak boldly, to be a bit more of a man than many other men nowadays are. So to act more courageously and to speak boldly, to proclaim the truth, even when there is backlash.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And that's very possibly true. I mean, I think, you know, are you hearing that dinging?
No.
Okay, good. Because I'm getting some kind of notification on my computer. I could try to find how to mute it, but if you're not hearing it, then we won't worry about it. But, you know, like they had this show on HBO back in the day called Scared Straight. And they would send these ex-convicts, guys that have been in jail like their whole life, and they would send them in to talk to like high school students that were like juvenile delinquents that were starting to act up. And they would tell them, brother, you do not want to go here. Let me tell you what it's like. And they would tell them all about prison, right? And these kids would be like scared, like, and they call it Scared Straight because they would be like, they don't want to get in trouble anymore, right? Now imagine if you would have sent like a pastor into a church, never been arrested, never gotten any trouble, and he's going to tell the kids, okay, kids, be good. Like, who are they going to listen to? They're going to listen to the freaking convict because he's been there. He knows. So, you know, maybe that's why God chose me, because I lived this life. I know where it ends. I did it. You know, if I told people not to have sex and I was this, you know, altar boy, they'd be like, get the hell out of here, dude. You don't know what you're talking about. You can't even get laid. Right? No, I've had sex with hundreds of women. I know it's empty. I know how I felt on Mondays when the weekend was over and I let look at myself in the mirror, and I know where my life was going. Nowhere. You know, like I wasn't fulfilling any purpose on the earth. I wasn't contributing to society in any way. And that's not a good feeling. You know, like you have negative thoughts about yourself. You think that other people have negative thoughts about you. And at the end of the day, you know, there'll be consequences in this life or the next. And, you know, that's real. So, but thank you for saying that. I think, you know, it has given me a certain level of expertise, you know, if not confidence.
Mm. Oh, it's definitely true. I've seen that in other realms of life, God using the same methods. Over here, I'm going to be short so that we don't divulge too much from the conversation. There is an Iranian guy from Iran, who's been in Bulgaria for about 25 years or however many. He's a convict. He's been in a shootout with guns and in a robbery and in an abduction case where they shot a person, and he's been in sex trafficking, drug trafficking, etc. The worst of the worst, and he's a Muslim. Was a Muslim. So years ago he was convicted and he went to prison over here in Bulgaria, and then the story goes that he found a book of a Bible from the Gideons. You know how they place Bibles in prisons and obscure places around the world. And he thought to himself, now that I don't have anything better to do, I might as well read the Christian Bible and find all the problems that they've got in their doctrine, because obviously I've got the right belief, Islam. He started immediately reading from the Gospels, and he said, well, what's that about? Why have 4 distinct Gospels if you're talking the truth? Why recount the same story 4 times? And by the time he started reading Mark, he said, I heard somebody cry. And I wondered, who's crying? We're in a prison, we're all men here. And then he realized that he was crying because of the cleansing power of the word. And now he started 2 churches, I think, in Bulgaria with a few thousand people.
That's amazing, dude.
Devoted Christian, because he took all the radical elements that he had trained himself to, through sin and through destruction, and now he's using them for the creative side of things, for order, for the godly work, which is...
It's a great story.
I make that parallel. I mean, it's a completely different side of life, but I make that parallel.
Yeah. That's the beauty too, right? It's never too late. God loves U-turns, so.
Absolutely. Rob, what's your stance on sexual deviations, things like masturbation, pornography?
I mean, I have to go back to, I guess I have to go back to the Word of God, and the Word of God is silent on masturbation. It is. It doesn't say anything about it. I used to go with the verse, okay, if you lust after a woman in your mind's eye, you commit adultery in your heart. But that's a mistranslation. I would go back and challenge anybody to look at that. It says, if you covet another man's wife, then you commit adultery in your heart. That's what Jesus said. Because how can it be adultery if you're single? It can't be. Okay, it has to be a married woman involved for it to be adultery, by the way, guys. Biblical adultery, the way the Bible defines adultery is if a married woman steps out on her husband, and you have sex with her, you're an adulterer. But if there's no married woman involved, it's not adultery. So masturbation, I don't think it's wise. Okay, is it sin? I can't say it's sin because the Bible doesn't say it's sin. I go with the thought, the saying that a thought leads to an action, and action leads to a habit leads to a character leads to a destiny. So if you're feeding thoughts, like you're thinking about women and you're jerking off or whatever, then the action, of having sex with one when it comes, like, I'll give you an example. This is okay. In the last, I was abstinent for the first 6 years of my Christianity. Didn't even go on a date, and then I fell off the wagon. Had a ton of sexual sin after that for about 5 years. Rededicated my life at the end of 2010 to God. Recommitted myself to sexual purity, and then from 2010 to the time I was married, I made 2 isolated mistakes in like 13 years. And one of those mistakes was this girl who was a friend of mine, and her and I were flirting with each other, and we were both physically attracted to each other, but I knew I didn't want to marry her. But I was physically attracted to her, and we were starting to get close, and I thought it was dangerous. And I said, listen, we got to stop hanging out alone. So I was afraid I was going to make a mistake. And she's like, that's stupid. She's like, we're just friends. I would never let that happen. And I let her make me believe that was the case. And I knew it wasn't true. But I let her make me believe it. And the next time we hung out, she was coming over, and I felt excited. My flesh got and I was like, I better jerk off. And I went and rubbed one out because I thought that would protect me. And we went and grabbed dinner after she wasn't there when I did this, obviously. But she came over to the house, and we went to dinner, and then we came back and had sex. And it was like, it didn't help. It only fed the animal, right? Because I don't think if your goal is really to make it to your wedding night and be sexually pure, for all the reasons that I mentioned, I don't think porn and lusting after women is going to help. Now, I get it. It's better than having sex with someone. And I certainly wasn't perfect in that area myself. I struggled with masturbation. I was abstinent for freaking 19 years of my adult life. It wasn't easy. It was very hard, and because I did not have the gift of singleness. So I struggled with all that, because it's like, what do you do, man? Like, you're not even, like, it's almost an impossible situation to be in. But I would encourage men to not, because there is, no fap. There's clearly health benefits in not masturbating. You can look up no fap. But also just, from the spiritual and the mental side. I know for me, I would always feel weaker after I masturbated, whether it was, I don't know if that was just like me feeling guilty, like, I didn't want to do this and I succumbed to the temptation, or because of just the physiological stuff, from releasing. But I would say, to me, now look, just that you ask a two-part question. Masturbation, I won't say it's sin. I don't think it's wise, but I don't think it's sin. Pornography, I think, is sin. I mean, that's another human being. That's another man's daughter or future wife or mom or something, like, and if we stop looking at it, they'll stop making it, right? So the reason that they make so much porn is consumption, because there's a market for it. So there's that. Okay, so you're contributing to the problem. But then also, there are very clear studies about what it does to your brain, where it actually makes you more depressed, because you get such a flood of dopamine when you're looking at all these crazy images, and then you ejaculate, and then your brain is trying to achieve stasis, I think is what it says. So it lowers dopamine receptors. So then now you need more, just everyday things in order to achieve the same level of happiness, right? Because you have less dopamine receptors. In addition to, I have friends that were looking at porn before they got married, Christian guys I knew. And then when they got married, they had a hard time getting it up with their wife, because the porn activated a different part of their brain, which was more about like an object versus an actual person. So then when they have a person in front of them, their dick doesn't get hard because they're so used to looking at objects, and it funks something up there. I'll give you another story. I had a friend that was straight, good friend of mine. He was not gay. But he looked at so much porn, he was having to watch gay porn in order to get off, because it was so twisted. He's like, it had to get more weird in order for him to get off. So I definitely think there's, pornography is harmful. It's poison. I've looked at it. I mean, not in a long time, but I haven't been perfect myself, but I would definitely discourage people from that.
Thanks for that, Rob. And I think it's an epidemic or a pandemic nowadays with men particularly. I mean, I don't know a single man, me included, who hasn't looked at porn at some point in their life.
Yeah.
And what you said about gay porn and homosexuality, that's something that I've come across before as well. Other people telling me stories how, because porn use is often compared to drug addiction.
Yep.
Because of the dopamine side of things and the neuron rewiring and all of that you mentioned. But it often comes, well, not often, but sometimes it comes to a stage where a person gets so oversaturated with regular pornography that they start looking at more nuanced and more extreme fetishes and homosexuality and all of that, which is a bit satanic, I would say.
Yeah. Kiddie porn. I've even heard like cases, I think, with people caught in child pornography, and it started out as something very normal, and then it had to get more twisted. I believe that the definition of diminishing returns, pornography may be in the definition in the dictionary, because you get diminishing returns over time. You have to get more of it. You have to do more to get the same result, or stranger things, like you said, and it gets less over time.
And it goes back to what we talked about in part one of our conversation about the lack of freedom, because a person might think that they got freedom to do whatever they want with their free time and to enjoy themselves or get some pleasure out of it. But at the end of it, they become a slave to that particular sin, which is in a much worse situation.
Exactly.
that they end up with. On the note of homosexuality and transsexuality, what do you reckon about those?
Well, I think the Bible's pretty clear about those as being sin. I mean, you know, I don't know if we want to get into this, but male homosexuality is clearly condemned in the Bible. I mean, it's the Bible calls it an abomination. Ironically, the Bible never mentions female relationships. Now, do I think lesbianism is a sin? Yes, I do. I think Romans 1 talks about women exchanging the natural for the unnatural. Could mean that. But if you read Leviticus 18, which goes over all the sexual laws, basically, you know, and in a very explicit, it basically says men don't have sex with men don't have sex with animals, women don't have sex with animals. It kind of omits female. Now, I have a feeling I know why that is, but I think you know, I think lesbianism is a sin. I mean, you know, so I'll just say that. I think homosexuality with males is clearly a sin. I think lesbianism is a sin. The Bible talks about a man who wears women's clothing is an abomination. You know, that's a sin. So yeah, I take everything back to Scripture. Even I get myself in trouble sometimes because I'll say some controversial things that the church believes that's not in the Bible. You know, like the female thing. People they got mad when I brought it up. I'm like, I can read though. What do you want me to do? It doesn't say it. I mean, now you can try to dance around it, but it doesn't say it. I mean, so, but no, I think those things are pretty clear.
Sorry about the provocative question, because I've lived in the UK as well, and I know that there is a bit of a stigma on these topics there. At least I imagine it might be somewhat similar in the US. Will you allow me one other provocative question?
Of course. No, you can ask as many as you want. You know, I'm not afraid of provocative. I got it till 10 o'clock, just FYI. So it's about 9 minutes.
Awesome. That's the second to last question, which I got.
Okay, good.
Where do you think the following trend comes from, that Christian Europe and the Christian world, or the post-Christian world, as well as the Jewish world, hosts some of the biggest gay pride celebrations, whereas the rest of the world doesn't, even though it's historically and biblically and doctrinally we are against homosexuality and sexual deviations and all of that. But gay prides in Brighton, in Berlin, in Tel Aviv, in Sydney, in the US, wherever, in London.
Yeah, I think it's a sign of the times. I think we're living in the end times. The Bible talks about how, you know, this is going to be, men will be inflamed with lust for one another. If we got to the root of it all, I think the root of it all is the fathers not being in the homes, or the fact that we just lost patriarchy. You know, like even the men that are in the homes oftentimes are just weak. We're just letting the women run the house, rule the roost. They make if the women aren't in charge, they're at least equal in the decision-making power, which is not really biblical, to be honest. The man's the head of the woman. Not to say we don't take her advice. Of course we do. And we sacrifice. We love her as Christ loved the church, which means we would die for her. We lay down our life for her. But it doesn't mean we let her lead, you know, make the decisions. And I think there's a lot of weak men, and I think there's a lot of absent men, and it's produced all this homosexuality. But I do think it's a sign of the end times. I think Jesus is coming back soon. Things just got too weird too quick. And I personally, even when God called me back in 2000, he sent me some signs that he was returning soon. And I believe he told me that I'd be alive to see it, at least to see the rapture, if not the second coming. I don't think I'll see the second coming. I think I'll be dead by then. But based off some stuff he told me. But I do think we'll see the rapture in our lifetime.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for that. And one other point which I wanted us to very quickly cover is on the practical side of things. In your book, you present a very radical tip for particularly to men on how to fight lust. And I find the concept very scary, where you talk about doing an oath in front of God.
Yeah.
So inviting the fear of the Lord with all its consequences to your actions. Can you very quickly explain that, please?
Yeah. I was struggling with, sexual temptation. I was very committed to not having sex before marriage. because that was always my kryptonite, was women. So, but at the same time, I did have a lot of sexual energy, and I was like not wanting to look at porn, and I'd go maybe 2 weeks, a week, 2 weeks without doing it, and then I would cave and I'd look at it, and then I'd look at it 4 times in one day, and then I would just feel like a complete failure the next day. So I was looking for some help, a solution, and I came across this article, and it talked about, I think it referred to Job, where he said, I made a covenant with my eyes not to look lustfully at a young maiden. And in this article, they suggest that we make a covenant, a promise to God, like an oath, like you said, where we're not going to look lustfully at a woman for a period of time. You determine that period of time. So, you know, if you're just starting out, maybe you do it for a day, you know, and you write it on paper and you say, God, I'm making a covenant with you not to look at a woman intentionally with lust. I would write intentionally because sometimes, you know, we're a man, you see a girl on the street and you're like looking, you're like, oh shoot, you know, like I didn't mean to do that, God. No, but I mean intentionally looking, porn, you know, staring, like when you know you're not supposed to, like after you realize, you know, that maybe you're doing it, but you say, you know, I'm making a covenant not to intentionally look lustfully at a woman or look at pornography for one day. God, you know, this is hard for me. I need your help to keep this promise to you. Please, you know, give me your Holy Spirit. Help me, give me strength in this area. And if I keep this promise, I'm asking you to bless me greatly. And maybe you're even thinking about something and specifically that you needed his help with. Because for me, I had started a new business and I was struggling. And I was like really wanting God to help me with it. So I was motivated to be obedient to him because I was praying so hard, asking for his help. So I'm like, okay, God, I'm going to put this on the altar. I'm going to stop masturbating for the next month. And God, I need your help to do it. But if I do it, if I keep this promise, please bless me greatly. Help me. Open doors for me that no man can shut. But if I don't keep it, God, punish me severely. And then you sign it and you date it. And that, what it does is it gives you the gas and the brake, because you got the gas because you want the blessing. You got the brake because you fear the punishment. And there were times, man, where I was like, because I would use porn sometimes as an antidepressant. I would be home alone on a Friday night. I'd been single for years. And I was like, I was mad at God. I was depressed. I was sad. I was lonely. And, you know, porn would make me feel a little bit better in the moment, right? It was just something that it made me feel something. But I signed this covenant and I'm like, so I just would go to bed angry or sad or whatever. But I'd wake up, man, I felt good. I was like, yes, I made it. I did it. I'm, you know, victorious. So it really got me through some tough spots. And I feel like it broke some strongholds for me. And it gave me just a little bit extra motivation that I needed to get to all that sexual, like, just, you know, I want to say sexual sin. And I do think it's sexual sin to look at porn. But it helped me get some of that out of my life because I built up, you know, some strongholds. I built up some bad habits from years of just living like that. And it really helped me clear some of that stuff out. So I would encourage anybody to do it as well. I'll just end with.
It's still a very scary concept in the liberal, pleasant world that we live in nowadays.
It is scary.
Yeah.
That's why it works. Yeah, that's why it works so well.
I can see why it would work, but it's still scary.
You're inviting his punishment, his severe punishment. Actually, what the article said, it says, punish me severely and fight against me with the sword of your mouth, Jesus. I was like, and I would write that because I wanted all the extra motivation I could get. I'm like, punish me severely, fight against me with the sword of your mouth, Jesus. Like that's serious. And then you sign it, man, that'll keep you out of some trouble.
Even you saying that, I get chills. You get a sense of the fear of the Lord immediately, don't you?
For sure.
It's tough stuff, Rob. Rob, thank you for that conversation, for both parts of it. It's been a pleasure. I hope the viewers got something useful out of it. I'm sure they did, on a personal level, on a theoretic level, or otherwise. And I encourage all of our viewers to read your book, Why Waiting Works, translated in the Bulgarian language, with the title Isčakaj, available everywhere.
I love it. Hopefully,
thanks,
thank you, Atanas. I never know. Tell me again. Atanas. Okay, like Adonis, but Atanas.
Yeah. That's fine. That's fine. Either way works. I've heard all sorts of variations of my name.
I bet you have.
My favorite one is Atlantis. I don't know where
Atlantis.
that came from.
The lost city.
Yep.
All right. Atanas. All right. Good stuff, man. Hopefully I'll get over there next year and be able to visit you. Shake your hand.
Would be a pleasure.
It would be.
You're very welcome to come over whenever.
God willing.
God willing. Take
All
care,
right.
Rob. Thanks.